Hello and welcome back to the Healthtech Vision podcast, brought to you by SomX. My name is Jessica and I am delighted to be joined today by the brilliant Hansen from Sanome. Hansen, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Can't complain. Thursday, nearing Friday, so it's great.
As you said, Thursday Eve, right? No, Friday Eve.
Friday, like Christmas
Friday,
Eve.
exactly.
Yeah. It feels a little bit like Christmas Eve. Yeah, it's nice, exciting.
Are you like what's coming tomorrow? Christmas Eve for Friday sounds exciting.
Very, very exciting.
You doing anything fun?
Yeah.
Or is it just the fact that it's Friday?
I think it's just the fact that it's Friday. I always find Fridays a lot more exciting than Saturday. Just because you get, I guess you're like further away from Monday.
Yeah, it's true. And it's the anticipation then of the fact that you've got Saturday before you need to then start thinking about the beginning of the next week.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I'm going to start this week's episode off slightly differently to how we usually do. Before I even get into who you are, what you do, and why you're here, I want to know, well, first of all, do you wear wearables? Are you into wearables? Are you a wearables person? Wearable.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I am very into wearables. Actually, in my last role, I was working for a company that produced wearables.
Ooh. Okay, we're going to come back to that.
Yes. Yeah.
So, my question is, what would your wearable say about you?
Whoa. Okay. I'm trying to think about what it would say that is appropriate for a podcast.
Well, I think mine would probably say, stand the F up, move your legs around, and get some more sleep, which is, I think, probably standard for most people.
Yeah, probably. Okay. In that vein, then I guess mine would probably say something along the lines of drink more water.
Yeah.
Please drink more water and just calm down. Everything's okay. It's probably what mine should say.
Yeah, nice. I have to say, I am one of those people that believes the water is elixir of life, which it kind of is. But whenever James, my husband, or anyone else is like, oh, I don't feel very well, or I've got a headache, and I the first thing I always say is, have you drunk any water today? To which I then receive evils. But I really, truly believe that water solves so many problems. Just drink more of it, and we'd probably all be doing a bit better.
I mean, that is so true. I used to sort of not drink a lot of water, but I guess like as you age, the last sort of year or two, I've been drinking so much water to a point where I guess I bring around this water bottle with me everywhere I go. And my friends have been
support water bottle.
Yes. Yeah. My friends have been calling me my emotional support water bottle. And it's now becoming a thing where I get a little bit stressed if I don't have it with me. But
I'm so with you. Kindred spirits right here.
Exactly.
It's nice being in the company of a fellow wearable appreciator because not everybody is. But welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Now, as I said, you are from Sanome and you are doing all things product. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Sanome's doing and your role there and how you're thinking about building products for clinicians?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I read a lot of your guys' newsletters. I listen to your podcast. And so it's really nice to be a part of this and on the other side of, I guess, of headphones.
A pleasure.
So I guess a little bit about myself. I sort of went to uni. I'm from Canada. I went to uni sort of doing a pre-med program in anatomy and sub bio. But then when I realized I didn't want to become a doctor, I kind of freaked out. Didn't know what to do with that. And then came to London and started sort of my tech journey 10 plus years ago. So I sort of worked in products within healthcare tech. From a startup to a scale up to a scale up that got acquired by a corporate, and then now I'm back to a startup, which is super exciting for me. And basically, my roles have varied within healthcare tech, but from the most part, we're building products for clinicians. So my last role was in remote patient monitoring. I was looking after sort of the care delivery part of the product and the platform. And over there, I was, involved in a lot of clinician co-designs, which I'm sure we're going to go into.
Mm,
So we're building sort of like, okay, what is the clinician experience like
yeah.
when it comes to patient care? Right, that brings us all the way to today, Sanome. I joined the team about 3.5 months ago, sort of inspired by the mission, and I just missed that fast-paced environment again in the startup world. But Sanome
Mm,
is basically what we do currently, is a risk reduction product at the heart of it.
mm,
And right now we have a predictor model to detect hospital acquired infections or to predict hospital acquired infections um, around 3 to 7 days before it actually happens. And we sort of pair that up with a patient sort of explainability dashboard to help clinicians understand how we derive to that score and whatnot, which I'm sure we're going to go into. I mean, it's a very hot topic of AI,
yeah.
explainability, and all of that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm a product lead here, and it's been an exciting ride so far.
Nice. I think we've been talking about product a lot here recently, and in particular, I think creating products for clinicians. And I think one of the things that so often is missed is people have brilliant ideas, but ultimately end up going so far down a path of creating a solution that actually doesn't solve the right problem. It solves a
Yeah,
problem, but maybe not the
right,
right problem, or it doesn't solve it in the right way
yeah,
for the people where they're trying to
right,
make impact. So
right.
I guess from coming at it from your perspective as a product expert, how do you approach that? You mentioned
Mm.
co-creation with clinicians. How do you bring clinicians on that journey?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is all about sort of building a product for clinicians by clinicians. So obviously, I don't have a clinical background, so really, it's about getting the right people along the journey. And I typically like to promote the process called co-design, and I think it's especially important within healthcare and clinical practice. And it's
Mm-hmm,
all about sort of creating value together with the
mm-hmm,
clinicians. And that comes in so many different sort of forms, right? So I think as a starter, and well, I'm happy to draw into detail, but as a starter,
mm,
sort of, we need to align with the end users, with the key stakeholders, what success looks like, and
mm,
how do we work together to drive this, um, you know, towards what success looks like. And it's really about sort of sitting down with clinicians, shadowing their days. What we should be looking for is creating that total empathy between the product and the clinician. So we're not really looking to create a product that sort of solves a problem in sort of in one moment in time. We want to ensure that we are solving. If we're creating a product that flows from the moment they start their day to the moment they end their day. So that for me has always been a guiding principle in how I develop product. Um, for especially for clinicians because I think they're overstretched. We all know that, and they work in a
mm,
very sort of important and critical environment as well. So I think those two factors needs to be taken into account. I think that's what's so unique about designing products for
mm.
clinicians. Um, so yeah, I mean, typically we shadow them. There's so many things we do, but really it's about co-creating value
Yeah.
together and testing different things and whatnot.
Nice. And I'm right in thinking you've just recently launched a new initiative called Frontline to the Future, where you're kind of bringing clinicians on that journey. But I guess it's a further eye on the future, what's coming, what's needed, the pain points that they're feeling, and then also putting them on a path to create opportunity and value for them to support them through their careers, whether that's on the front line or in terms of innovation as well. So tell me a little bit more about that and how
Yeah.
that's working in practice.
Yeah, definitely. So we just started the program, still quite fresh. I actually spoke to two of people who signed up for in sort of indicated their interest today. And it's super early days, but what we do know is that we cannot continue to design and produce and create and build products in silo anymore. We need a continuous feedback loop. And I think what's been so challenging with building products in this space is actually getting the clinician time, right?
Yeah.
So especially if we are looking for sort of junior doctors and nurses, those are the ones that are the most time poor. Even though we sort of enter into these co-design sessions with hospitals, a lot of the times it's very hard to get clinician time. So that is the problem that we aim to solve with this program on our end. And we also see on the flip side, there's more and more interest in this space within clinicians of wanting to learn more about healthcare tech. So that's where the idea came from was, okay, so we've got a problem on our side, there's a problem to solve on their side. How do we marry that up together? So
Yeah.
how do we provide that, practical experience for clinicians, and how do we continue to also incorporate clinician feedback in everything we do, and really looking beyond the now into the next. And right now the program, I mean, early days, we're still collecting. It's very similar to a product development process where we are still collecting requirements
Yeah, of
from
course.
the users and whatnot. But what we're hearing a lot about is they want to definitely innately, there's a desire to want to contribute. There's a sense of frustration with the way that clinical technology is currently. There's definitely frustration. I'm amazed each time I hear about there's still hospitals and trusts without EPRs or EHRs. There's still
Yeah.
paper. I'm amazed. And so there's a lot of that cohort of people who's frustrated with the current state and status quo, and they also want some sort of say in the future, but also some sort of practical work with healthcare tech. So we're looking at, okay, how do we create sort of networking opportunities for these clinicians? How do we create educational sessions for these clinicians about healthcare tech? We've got some great clinical advisors already. So is it about them holding educational sessions on how to break into healthcare tech, what that really means? And we're still trying to figure out the cadence and whatnot, but it's a super exciting program for us. I'm really, really, really excited to be able to launch something like this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it speaks so like volumes that ultimately like you've identified a need there. It's an industry need and at that clinical level, and trying to identify ways where you can really give back to that community, I think is so important. And I think, is it really interesting what you were saying as well about wanting to engage with actually more we call them junior doctors, but doctors who are more junior in their career, the resident doctors,
Yeah.
F2s, core trainees,
Yes.
early registrars, because ultimately they really are the people who are at the front line, who are facing a lot of this friction and these challenges and are feeling the most burnt out. And that's not to say that other clinicians and other healthcare professionals aren't feeling that, but I think you've really identified kind of where that focal point of friction is. And I saw something the other day, Dr. Annabelle Shiromemo, I don't know if you know her, but she's an author and she's a sexual health consultant, community sexual health consultant. She's doing loads of research. She's written an amazing book called Divided, which I recommend everybody reads, and it's about racism and bias in healthcare and like the roots of that. But anyway, she had shared something on LinkedIn about the fact that often we get it wrong when we're asking the wrong people for answers, and we have really well-intentioned innovators who really want to solve problems and think that they've spotted a potential solution. We have, and often we're engaging with much more senior clinicians who potentially are not working on the front line anymore, or they've even exited clinical care. And so actually don't have their kind of finger on the pulse with like, and feeling really viscerally those problems and challenges. And so actually in the scenario she cited was in women's health is actually we're not focused on solving the right problems in women's health, and we're kind of missing the mark, and therefore we're just not having the impact and making the progress that we should be, purely because we're not joining the right dots in the right places.
Oh,
So
100%.
I think,
And
identifying that as a challenge and being able to have those conversations is clearly, I think a real early marker for success.
yeah, I definitely agree. And I also think that I think similar to sort of new starters at any work environment, the new starters will always have a fresh perspective
Yeah.
on sort of like how operations are run. I think
Mm,
what happens over time is that I don't, for the lack of a better word, but potentially even starting in or going being in the same company for decades, you become a little bit more, I guess, like used to or complacent with the process, and a lot of innovation actually comes through whenever you have new starters into a company. So it's a very
yeah.
similar concept.
Mm.
And especially I think with the younger, I would say younger generation, I'm like feeling like I'm dating myself a little bit, but with that younger generation of people coming in with the uptake of technology, there's more and more, I guess, um, opinions on how things could be, what things could look like. And so I guess like the doctors that are a little bit more junior in their careers really bring that perspective.
Yeah.
Frontline to Future program, it's something we're super proud of. How that evolves over time, we'll see. And yeah, I hope people listening stay tuned on that.
But if there are any clinicians listening who that sounds like an amazing opportunity, you want to get involved, check out Healthtech Pigeon this week. We have a link to be able to go and register your interest. You can go and talk to Hansen, find out more about it. And we'll pop the link in the show notes as well. But yeah, for anyone who that might resonate with, there is an opportunity ready, yours for the taking. Well, do you know what? Let's jump into our first story of today. The first story this week is one from you. So just announced that you have launched, I say you, Sanome has launched a pilot with Royal Devon Hospital Trust and off the back of a really incredible Innovate UK grant, so £300,000 to basically look at how we roll. I say we, I am not responsible for this at all. The royal
If you
we,
want to
how
come
we
on this
roll,
journey to start, come, yeah.
how we can roll out AI, clinical AI technology in a way that supports clinicians. It does the job that clinicians need it to do. It maximizes clinical input, but ultimately and fundamentally in a safe and explainable way. And you mentioned explainable AI just now, and we'll dig into that in a minute. But I think sometimes pilots have a bit of a bad rap in the NHS, but they shouldn't. Not all of them. So tell us a little
And
bit about the work Sanome is doing with Royal Devon and what you're seeking to achieve and come out the other end.
yeah. No, this is super exciting for us. Definitely. And I think I definitely, we can talk about the expandability part in a bit. But this is a really, really exciting grant. So what we're trying to do with this particular grant is we are looking, so we obviously have an existing predictor model to detect or to predict rather hospital-acquired infections. But with this particular grant, we are looking to incorporate new data inputs. So it would be lab data, pathology data, and clinical notes, which I'm really excited about. That is such just a bank of data and information that we're really excited as a company to dig into. And I know from our internal research we've done that the clinical notes could really make a difference in the model performance. So as part of that, we are incorporating new data inputs into our model to make that even better. We are also going to be really exciting integrating with a new EPR that we will add to our portfolio of integrated EPRs.
I'm sorry, what's the benefit of being integrated into the EPR?
Well, again, it comes back to what our earlier conversation was, right? Like we want to make sure we're designing products and building products that's going to fit into a clinician's workflow, not just a point of time. And I mean, this is also part of why shadowing clinicians is so powerful because once you're there, you realize they've got a million different tools that they have to use and a million different tabs that are open. And each time they look for something, it's, a million different clicks. And so adding on to sort of like all of that, we really wanted to make sure that our product is integrated within their workflow. So this is not seen as yet another tool they have to manage. The other day is super interesting because I was shadowing a nurse, and she goes, this is a bit of an existential question. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Yeah, go on. And she said, I keep hearing that AI is meant to make our work more efficient and easier, but I keep feeling like it's adding to my workload.
Oh, that is
And
not
I
what
was
you want
like,
to hear.
wow. And she's like, she was basically like, that is just what I've been experiencing with all these different things that are adding on, blah, blah, blah. And that is exactly the type of thing that we actively are trying to avoid. And I think integrating with an EPR is just the start of that, just to make sure that we are meeting our users where they are instead of them having to go yet to another place. And we want to make sure that information proximity is there. And you know what? The EPRs are the source of truth. That's where clinicians live. So that's why it's so important for us to not exist as a separate entity. But yeah, so part of that grant is integrating with the new EPR, quite a big one as well. Super exciting. And this is why, and we can go into more detail if we want, but this is why co-designs are super important because each EPR is so different, very, very different. And we want to make sure that we are designing a solution that works with each one. Um, and on top of that, this grant will also see us enhance our explainability dashboard to build user trust, and really building on top of what we have already because we have so many ideas right now. And yeah, there's that. And then finally, we're looking to deliver what we call a TRL6 prototype. What that just means sort of technology readiness level 6. So it's a live prototype deployed in a hospital ward, running on real EPR data, evaluated from a reg perspective, et cetera, et cetera. So that is sort of, I guess, the remit of the grant, which is all super exciting. I'm genuinely excited by all of this. And yeah, can't wait to get started over there.
Amazing. It sounds like this feels sort of like a springboard to creating a real blueprint for then how this can roll out across other NHS organizations, but
Go ahead.
really putting in the reps and the legwork to get it right from that safety and explainability and that trust perspective, so that you're dealing with those any challenges that kind of come up and nipping those in the bud early, so that when you're at the point to roll out, it's a much smoother process and the friction is so much less. We know that adoption and scale is one of the hardest challenges, particularly in any health
Mhm.
system, but certainly in the NHS. So, that feels like really valuable time spent and, an investment in energy, obviously, as well as capital, from all sides, and
Yeah,
amazing to have such a great partners joining you on that.
yeah, exactly. And I think even though, the initial investment in time feels a little bit, it is a lot of work because the healthcare environment, it is so complex. So many players are involved. There's so many decision points that happen. There's so many systems being used. The stakes are a lot higher. It is a very complex environment to map out sort of like that current state is what I like to call it. And then understanding where are all the biggest pain points that we want to address. I think you were talking about earlier, Jessica, are we solving the right problem? Right.
Yeah.
So until you have sort of like a blueprint of their entire workflow, is very hard to identify, there's problems all over the place, but are we like, where do we want to solve? Where do we want to play? And then what are some I call them sharp problems. So sort of like high frequency problems and high impact problems.
Yeah.
So, mapping all of that out, understanding the challenges, and really empathizing with the users during this co-design and designing of the pilot and all of that. It's super, yeah. I mean, I can talk about it for days, but
You mentioned a couple of times explainable AI, and I think again, this is something that comes up so often when we're talking about AI, is this kind of black box AI where, especially in the context of large language models, of generative AI, where we just can't explain how it has come up with an answer or a conclusion or a data point. So what does explainable AI mean to you at Sanome?
Yeah.
And how are you using that then to build trust with clinicians?
Yeah, I think, that in itself is sort of like a big, Pandora's box. But I think what I'm seeing a lot in the industry right now is actually people potentially conflating explainability and transparency.
Right. Okay.
And I think transparency, it doesn't always mean opening up the black box. I think sometimes it just means exposing the right context. So I think a good example is, like within an AI algorithm, you can expose every coefficient, every weight, every feature interaction. But at the end of the day, like clinicians don't need a lecture in stats, mid-shift. They need to sort of understand the context. And so I think explainability AI in healthcare, I think for us, is more about making sure clinicians understand enough about a model's reasoning to trust it, to challenge it, and to use it safely. And I think it matters a lot because at the end of the day, clinical decisions affect lives. It influences
Yep.
behaviors. Clinicians ultimately, at the end of the day, no matter what technology they use, are still kind of accountable for the outcomes. And the reg
Yep.
scrutiny is so high on that as well.
Mm.
I think from a Sanome context or a product called memory,
Yep.
from a memory context, we want to be able to explain to the clinician why a particular patient is at higher critical risk of an infection or of deteriorating. So to support that, there were a lot of sort of studies, user studies, and sort of user research that happened to produce this explainability dashboard to supplement and explain why the risk is high. So we have things like, what it's called SHAP, feature contribution. So basically it just means, it calculates the contribution of each feature to the final output. So for instance, if Bob's risk score is high, is that mainly due to his temperature? Is that mainly due to his pulse? Is that mainly
Interesting.
due to his
Okay.
base infection? And then we also provide sort of supplementary data as well in terms of vital trends. So explaining how Bob has been trending. And we've had pretty good feedback on that. There's so much more we want to do, which is why this grant is so important to us. But yeah, I mean, from our research and just from working with clinicians over time, they really want to know, why is this patient high risk? Is this clinically plausible? Is this picking up something I've missed? Should I act? What is the national local protocol I need to consider or act upon seeing this information? And I think going back to sort of clinicians that may be a little bit more junior on their
Yeah.
journeys is, how do we help support them through it all? So we actually have next best actions as part of our explainability dashboard as well to help guide them and answer the so what piece. It also provides confidence to the clinicians whenever they do need to escalate to a senior member of staff and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's obviously super key. We also do quite a bit of, well, part of our regulatory sort of, I guess, like, it dictates for us to run post-market surveillance. So we're continuously sort of monitoring what happens with the product, how our users are using the product, as part of our surveillance and clinical studies as well.
And that's part of your memory has achieved the EU MDR Class 2B regulation
Medical
standards
device, yeah.
as a clinical decision support, right? And I think, again, that's really testament to this sort of compliance and regulatory culture that is clearly, really within the DNA of Sanome. And I think increasingly other innovation companies are recognizing that becomes non-negotiable, particularly in the context of AI, and why also this explainability piece is really important, as you're kind of considering as you said, the stakes in healthcare are so much higher, and so you can't afford to cut corners. You need that level of explainability, yes, for the trust with clinicians, but also because that's what the standards dictate, and you have to be able to adhere. You have to be able to adhere to that. It's not, you can't just plug this technology in and kind of see what happens and hope for the best. That's not the reality that we're operating in here, is it?
Yes. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think ultimately we are trying to create trust with the technology. I think what we've seen is that over time, trust in AI has, has been increased. I think from my experience now, actually, when I speak to clinicians, they care less about the technology behind it. So they don't, well, some of them, most of them don't really care that it's AI powered. They just wanted to solve the problem. But then how can they trust it, right? And I think there's a lot that comes with it. We try our best to build trust through so many different things, from expandability to prospective trials, real world validation, bias audits, drift monitoring, and all of that. Um, and we do take a hybrid approach to all of it. Like we try to have a very clear UX explanation. We try to have strong evaluation, ongoing monitoring, sort of, continuous communication and co-designs and etc. to promote trust and explainability for sure.
Another big topic that I love talking about, is equity in healthcare. And I think, data bias is a huge part of that. And we had a conversation last week actually around Fitbit have rolled out an agent basically that sits across the top of its wearables and the dashboards and all of that kind of thing, to kind of be your health coach, your nutritionist, your sleep coach, your PT, all of those kinds of things. And we also saw that Apple have kind of pulled back from similar technology recently, and we were debating why that might be, given particularly that Apple has one of the biggest health data sets globally. And we kind of got into the conversation about the fact that, wearables they cost money, and therefore they're collecting data from people who can afford to wear those wearables, and that generally isn't a representative population, and often that will then mean that data set is going to be skewed, not necessarily biased, but definitely skewed. And if you're making assumptions based on that data set, they may not then be accurate in the recommendations it's giving you, or it may miss things. We know that data is generally relatively biased. We know that healthcare is biased. I touched on that previously. So I'm really keen to kind of understand as well, kind of from your perspective, as you're building products, but also in what you're doing at the moment, how from all of the different sources that you're collecting data and how you're utilizing that, how you're safeguarding against this kind of bias that might exist, and how you're mitigating for it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question and very topical, obviously. And I think going back to sort of earlier about our status as Class 2B medical device, I think actually in this instance, and this is something that we say a lot internally within the company, that regs is sexy. Because as part of the regulatory submission and requirements, we do.
Yeah, that is definitely Benedict's tagline at the moment, isn't it?
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. But the more I dig into it, right, like the more I'm like, you know what? You're actually right. You are right, because it puts up so many safeguards along the way. And we do a lot of subgroup analysis and lots of validation work as part of our regulatory submission. And we I mentioned earlier, post-market surveillance work. We do assess these as part of our regulatory sort of, from an ethical perspective, yes, we do them. But from a regulatory sort of compliance requirement perspective, we need to continue to run these assessments even after our product has launched in a real world setting. So we do look at a lot of. So what I mean by subgroup analysis is that we look at types of patients. So obviously, we continue to assess based on sex, age, ethnicity. There are protected characteristics that we assess our model on as well. So protected characteristics can mean things like the deprivation index, which is quite topical to what you were talking about earlier, Jessica, of like, are we making sure that we are taking into account different socioeconomic factors as well? And I think whenever I think about sort of like ethical AI and socio-demographic impact, I think about, have you read the book, The Health Gap, or have you heard of the book, The Health Gap?
I have heard of it. Yeah, I don't think I've read it.
Oh, it's really good. Basically, it analyzed sort of like health outcomes on the same street, but a lot of it talked about, part of the street is a little bit more lower on the socioeconomic end, and part of the street is higher, and there's huge gap in that.
Wow.
So we do take into stuff like that. And this is something that we continue to assess on a regular basis as well. But yeah. Big topic though. I think
Yeah.
probably our AI lead, Andrew, is so knowledgeable in the space. He can probably talk about it for days, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not something that is going away anytime soon. I think heartening to hear that ultimately it's something that is really central to the way that you're building your products and also the way that you're approaching solving problems too. Yeah, and kind of factoring in new ways to solve that as a challenge. The more data that we get access to, and also how we process data. You talked about the fact that you're really excited that you're able to now use clinical notes within
Yeah.
the memory context in order to be able to utilize that data. I think we've all heard the jokes about the illegibility of clinical notes at the best of times, even if they are digital.
I think that's also part of the reason why co-designs are so important and so central to product development in a clinical sense, because we need that interpretation alongside clinicians to understand sort of like, okay, are these notes saying what we think they're saying? Are there any nuances within the patients that you see? I think working, like my previous role, my previous company, I worked a lot in the US health systems. And we worked with a lot of Medicaid patients. And this is like such an interesting story that really stuck in the back of my mind, because, we went to these patient homes for remote patient monitoring, and in our product at the time, we had put in, put this scale on a flat surface as an instruction. And
Wow.
that seemingly is such a simple instruction. But then, when we see low adherence rates of scale usage, we're kind of like, man, like, why is that? Like, what is happening? And then you go into these patient homes, and for patients that may live in a lower socioeconomic environment, it's actually not that simple of an instruction, because they live in oftentimes very small spaces, very cluttered, very crowded, and the flooring is all carpeted. So where are they going to put on a flat, hard surface? It's actually harder than we think. And so I think getting to experience stuff like that and having that be part of the co-design, I know we're sort of going outside the clinician scope and more into the patient scope, but is really understanding and creating empathy with the patient types, so that we're not designing product just for a particular type of patient, and that we are sort of designing products and creating products that's not going to widen the gap, really.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings us beautifully onto our second story this week. Reported on the Fast Company, and it's about a startup who is also using AI to cut hospital alarms on the basis that it may help patients get home faster. Now, this startup is called CalmWave, and I know part of what
In
obviously you've been doing at Sanome is recognizing this sort of alert fatigue that exists for clinicians. You talked a lot about having lots of tabs open as a clinician. I'm not a clinician and I can sympathize with that. I turn my notifications off on my phone. Means I miss important things sometimes, like birthdays and phone calls from nursery. And I have a million tabs open on my desktop. So I think anything that can reduce the everything's competing for attention, and anything that can reduce that, amazing. But what I hadn't clocked is actually, I totally see it from the clinical perspective, like as a professional. But I'm really interested in what they say here about, and what their intention is in terms of getting patients home faster. And as I thought about it, it made so much sense, because they're talking about alarms here. And you only have to walk through a hospital, even a GP practice, and there's all sorts of beeping, there's all sorts of alarms going off.
Oh my God.
It's a
Oh my
really
God. Yeah.
noisy environment. And
Very noisy.
when I had my little boy in just over a year ago now, I had a C-section, so I then went into the obs unit, and then I went into the maternity ward. And obviously everyone jokes about babies crying and it being noisy and all that kind of thing, but the main noise is the machines, and it almost becomes sort of white noise in the background. But it makes sense that ultimately that kind of interference and that mental load that it's creating could be interfering with how patients are recovering, particularly if you're thinking about even sleep, for example. It's hard to sleep at the best of times in a hospital, let alone with all of the beeps and then being disturbed because you need medication, all that kind of thing. But what did you take from this story? What's your kind of perspective on it?
Yeah, I think that story, when I read that, I was like, I really, really empathize with it. And that was like the first thing I noticed when I started working in product, going on site to hospitals. That was the first thing that caught sort of my attention. And it's kind of like, wow, this is a lot of noise. It's a lot of noise. And then what you end up seeing happen is that these clinicians get, as we mentioned, alert fatigue, and they start just not even reading the alerts, because they kind of just see things pop up and they close them, close them, close them. And obviously that has sort of like clinical safety sort of implications as well. And I think when we're designing products that have an alert or alarming capability, that really needs to be taken into account. And I remember at the time I was somewhere in the depths of the US in a hospital. There was just alarms all the time. And I remember in the back of my mind being like, wow, like somebody needs to solve for this. So when I read that article, I was like, wow, like years later, somebody is solving for it, which is super exciting. And what caught my eye in that article is there's an element that they mentioned about personalized alarming, which I actually think is brilliant, because all I've been hearing, especially the last sort of 4 or 5 years, ever since we really started leveraging data in a significant way, all I've been hearing is patient baseline. And all I've been hearing is not every single patient is the same. So why would we alert, or why would we treat the patients the same way? So I was super excited and impressed by the fact that they're taking that into account. So getting closer and closer to and customization for the patient. And they definitely also, have an explainability a factor to it as well. So it seems like, they're doing a really good job explaining why. This makes sense when alarms fire, when, why, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, they're the first that I've been hearing about reducing the number of alerts, because honestly, yeah, it's noise. It's a lot of noise, and it's such an interesting concept, because, like you said, patients need rest, but at the same time, you're having all this noise around them. Uh, so it's a hard balance. And yeah, same with you, Jessica. I turn my phone on airplane mode all the time just to cut out the noise. To a point, I know so many of my friends do it as well. They're like, "Why is it called airplane mode when when we in everyday life we use it more often off the plane than on the plane?"
Yeah, definitely. I think what I find so interesting about all of this as well is that if you were to describe what you would believe to be like the optimal environment for healing and recovery and care, actually the hospital as we know it today would just be the total antithesis of that.
100%. And I think that, I mean, there's really good movement being made right now, right, in the world of virtual wards as
Yeah, that's
as
true. Yeah.
COVID. I think in the UK and the US, I think in the US, they've actually just approved, it's called CMS waiver. They've just approved a 5-year extension on funding of
Mhm.
hospital at home programs. Which anyway just goes back to the point that, is hospital the best place for healing? I mean, most of patients prefer to be at home, and so how do we best facilitate that? But yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Well, solving a real problem, right? And that is what we love to see. So, with that, let's finish up with our final story of this week. Listeners will know that I really love it when health tech makes it into the cultural zeitgeist and we see this crossover of health tech into popular culture, because it doesn't happen that often outside of the wearables hype, which obviously I still love to hear about. But this story comes to us from Time, and the headline is how the Pitt's AI drama is playing out in real hospitals. Now, I hadn't heard of the Pitt when I read this story, but have you?
Yes, all my friends have been talking about it. I've not
Okay.
personally seen it, but all my friends talk about it. It sounds to me like it's basically each episode is 1 hour of a 15-hour
Mm-hmm.
shift, which is super interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
I've not seen it personally, but I've heard just fantastic things. I'm
Okay.
surprised. Oh, I guess it's quite American, maybe. Um,
Yeah. The vibe I'm getting is that this is kind of like if Grey's Anatomy and 24 were to have a baby, this is the program that would come out of it. Have you watched 24? Do you know what I'm talking about here?
oh man, I don't. Okay, to answer both your questions, have I seen 24? No. Have I heard about it? No.
Do you know what?
Um,
That this is so
Tell me
okay
more.
though, because I love uncovering a new series that I need to watch, and this one is a bit vintage now. But I grew up on this probably when I was like maybe between like 13 and 20-ish, probably a bit younger. But basically, 24. You know Kiefer Sutherland, right? You
I
definitely
don't.
you do know who
What?
Kiefer
What?
Sutherland is.
What?
I know you
Okay.
do because
Okay.
I'm really bad at actors, but I can recognize a face. And basically, he plays this in most movies and TV programs. He plays this archetypal, like secret agent saving the
Mm.
world under pressure. He's like he's got some like personal problems. He can't hold down a relationship. Like you know the score.
Yeah.
But anyway, basically, and I don't know how many series of 24 there are because I never got to the end because there were so many. But essentially, the whole series is 24 hours where he has to save the world from some kind of thing as an undercover agent. And it's very like edge of your seat. It's probably quite dated now, but it's one of those, it's a good program to have in rotation because it's a bit of escapism. And then obviously, we're talking about the Pit here, the intersection with Grey's Anatomy, which is so well loved.
I
I have
love
to say
Grey's
I've never
Anatomy.
watched Grey's Anatomy. So you're ahead of me on that one, right? I've never watched Grey's
No.
Anatomy.
No.
I feel like I'm really
It's
exposing myself here.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think they're on series like 2000 or something at this point. It's been running since the
Mm.
beginning of time, but the earlier ones are really, really, really good. And I
Okay.
feel like the earlier ones probably inspired a lot of doctors to become doctors. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, great series.
Nice.
I'll watch 24 if you watch Grace.
Okay, deal. Um, Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent here, but
Sorry.
essentially, no, not at all. What I love about this is obviously, you know, we're seeing OpenAI Health, ChatGPT Health, should I say, Claude Health. So from that perspective, in terms of like product rollout and people getting comfortable with AI in the context of healthcare, in the cultural zeitgeist, like, you know, normal people who are not like you and I, unapologetic health tech nerds who live and breathe this stuff. And what I love about this is just that, you know, AI is now showing up as a core theme of season 2 of an 5-time Emmy award-winning medical drama, which makes me feel even worse that I haven't seen it. But I think it speaks so much to where, like, I guess like the acceptance and the acknowledgement that actually this is the direction that healthcare is headed in. But also, you know, I wonder how far you know, institutions like this, and I am calling the program an institution, having not watched it, go to actually building trust, particularly with patients, in terms of how technology is being used and seeing the familiarity of that. Yeah, I don't know. Are you as excited about this as I am? I feel like I'm really just nerding out here.
No. I'm super excited about it. I think a lot of I'm seeing a lot more clinicians being very more comfortable with AI. And I think the more clinicians I talk to, the more they're kind of like, you know what? You know, AI's 2% error rate is still better than, you know, dictation when somebody was talking about AI scribes or something. And I think that, and this is something, you know, I was talking to actually about with a colleague recently, where we're kind of like, you know what, like AI just needs to be better than humans. It doesn't need to be 100%. It may not need to be 100%, but as long as it's better than humans, then that's, you know, an improvement that we should be taking. And I think as long as we continue to safeguard against what we were talking about earlier, so like, you know, model drift, biases, and as long as we continue to engage clinicians in building the product together, and then, you know, doing all of this great stuff and creating trust and really servicing benefit, I think, yeah, I mean, it's a whole, like, the world is our oyster pretty much. And it's really exciting to see it play out in real life, or not real life, I guess, in this case, television. But yeah, super, super exciting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so in this article it says that a survey by the American Medical Association says that 2/3 of physicians are using AI to some degree in their clinical practice, but other healthcare workers are basically just saying that it's being rolled out too fast and is making too many errors because it's a high stakes field. And we've talked about that.
Yeah.
What I would say to your point though is that, you know, AI being better than a human, it just has to be better. But I think what we so often forget is that ultimately it's not AI in isolation, it's AI plus a human. And it's about those two together being better than the human on its own, but not because the human isn't good enough, but it's to make things better and easier for the clinician. And that ultimately, you know, the aim of the game is just making care better. It's not about things.
Yes.
Sometimes it is about care not being good enough, and there are lots of reasons for that. But that's not a reflection on the clinicians who are delivering that care. There's often a reflection of the system and the environment that they are in. And so I think it's people sometimes try and make AI, and particularly AI in healthcare, too black and white, where it's the AI versus the clinician. And for the most part, it's the AI and the clinician making things better for the clinician and the patient. And we don't need that kind of friction because it's
100%. I think it's not going to replace clinicians. I think it supplements. You know, it really supplements, and I think that's why it's called clinical decision support. A lot of tools instead of clinician, you know, decision making. Clinical decision making, it's support. So I think you're totally right, Jessica.
Yeah, and we also know that if an AI is to independently make decisions and take action, the level of regulation that's required is so much higher. And
Yeah.
therefore, it is right to have a certain level of skepticism, but ultimately, if it's going to be put in those places, is going to and should have been put through its paces to make sure that it is safe. It's not a case of, as we talked about, just kind of throwing a few different bits of technology in, seeing what works, and then iterating from there. It's the reverse of that completely.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I will get really excited when there is a rerun of House. Did you watch House?
I've seen a few episodes.
Okay, fine. I will say it's not aged super well, but
really, is it just like the jokes they make and stuff?
Yeah, there's some bits where you're like, okay, that wasn't great, but I like sentiment, the investigative side of it, and the grittiness of it, and the humor. Hugh Laurie is great.
Yeah, he's great.
So I would love to see House make a comeback and see how House responds to having technology in his department, and how whether or not he's resistant to it or trusts it. My gut feel is he'll probably be quite resistant, but something will happen, and then he'll create some like incredible technology that no one else has thought of, and because he's just got such a mastermind brain, he will have just solved all of these inherent challenges that we've spent the last hour talking about.
100%. I mean, I've not seen sort of like the recent seasons of Grey's Anatomy, but I would also love to see how they would deal with AI in that hospital, because that hospital has had everything happen to it in the last 20 something years. So I would love to see how they deal with AI.
Do you know what? I've got an idea. Benedict might slap us on the wrist and say we're getting distracted here, but maybe we need to pitch to Netflix. Wait, actually, Grey's Anatomy is not on Netflix, or is it? I don't know. Anyway, whoever is hosting Grey's Anatomy right now, maybe we need to, and producing it, we need to pitch to them that we get Sanome in, and that 100%. Could be a feature. There's a lot of issues with, as we've talked about, hospital-acquired infections, people deteriorating really, really quickly. I think not a missed opportunity because I haven't missed it yet, but I think there's something in that. We need to think of some more crossovers like this.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'll pitch it to Benedict to see what he thinks, if that's worth diverting our priorities to pitch to Netflix. But but we'll see. I don't know that conversation is going to go that well, but yeah.
Well, that can be a side quest. So watch this space. Watch this space. If you see Sanome and any other health tech on Grey's Anatomy, know that idea started here. It was us. It was
exactly.
Us.
This is the place of origin.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think we can finish before we come up with any other crazy ideas and distractions. But I want to just say thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me today and get into the weeds of what's going on in clinical AI products and how we should be tackling them. And just remind me before we finish, how can people who are interested in getting involved in the Frontline to the Future program, how can they find out more about that?
Yeah, so definitely feel free to reach out to us any way you like. We've made a few LinkedIn posts if you're on LinkedIn. And I think, Jessica, you mentioned that it will also be on the Healthcare Tech Pigeon in the upcoming newsletters, or do that. Or you can email me straight up. So my email address is Hansen, Hanse. Whoa, how did I spell my name? HANSEN .tsui@sanome.com. And we can go from there. Or reach out to us. I think the best way is probably either on LinkedIn, or I'm sure we'll include a sign up from link in the Pigeon newsletters coming up. But it's a super exciting opportunity for sure. And we're really looking forward to having clinicians by your side every step of the way.
And of course, if you are at a hospital that is not yet working with Sanome or looking for some kind of clinical decision support, hospital-acquired infections, big challenge, then I reckon Hansen is probably the person to speak to as well. Sounds like there's huge opportunity, especially after the rollout of what is already seemingly a really successful pilot at Royal Devon, and there'll be lots of learning to come out of that. So excited to see where that shows up next. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm sure we'll be chatting in very soon.
Amazing. Well, again, happy Friday Eve. And we'll chat soon.